David Ortiz was slow, overweight, and played basically no defense throughout his career. Yet, none of that stopped him from dominating MLB as one of the most feared hitters of his generation. And with that skill, he managed to win 3 championships, become a 10-time All-Star, and even earn a spot in the Hall of Fame. But he wasn't always the beloved legend that he is today, having dealt with countless controversies and setbacks. So, to really understand his story, we need to go back to the beginning, when he was born on November 18th, 1975. Ortiz was raised near the capital city of the Dominican Republic, an area filled with violence and crime. But fortunately, he was shielded from that environment thanks to his parents. His father had played professional baseball for several years, so naturally, David was drawn to the sport from a young age. Over the years, he began developing his skills, eventually becoming a standout player by the time he made it to high school. And at just 17 years old, he ended up signing with the Seattle Mariners for $10,000. But the decision to follow his dreams and leave behind his family did not come easily. He later recalled a specific moment before he left, saying that, "I remember my mom when she dropped me off at the airport crying, seeing her baby boy walking away for the first time." Nonetheless, he had been waiting for this moment his entire life, and the real journey had only just begun. When he made it to Single A in 1996, Ortiz was an imposing figure on the field. He had always been a big kid, but he now stood at 6'3", weighing 230 pounds. So it was no surprise when one of his coaches said this: "He shows tremendous power. He needs to work on his defense, but as an offensive player, he's one of the best in the league." The following season, he was traded to the Minnesota Twins, and it didn't take long before he was called up to make his debut. So at just 21 years old, Ortiz had already achieved his dream of reaching MLB. But unfortunately, the next few years would be the most difficult time of his entire career. Ortiz put up solid numbers in his first few months, and was seen as the number 2 prospect for the Twins. But after suffering a fractured wrist in 1998, his season was cut short, and the following year, he was only given 20 at-bats in the majors, in which he would fail to record a single base hit. Not to mention, Ortiz was undeniably slow, especially at first base, resulting in less and less playing time on the field. But to make things even worse, he was about to receive the most crushing news of his entire life. In January of 2002, his mother was involved in a fatal car crash in the Dominican Republic, and Ortiz was devastated, saying that "you never really get through it. She was pretty much my everything. She just wanted me to be happy with what I was doing." So from that point on, Ortiz did everything in honor of his mother, including pointing to the sky after every single home run. 2002 was his best season yet in almost every category, but it just wasn't enough to make up for constant injuries and a lack of defense. His base running was also among the worst in baseball, with only 4 stolen bases in 7 seasons. So at 27 years old, he had yet to prove himself as an everyday player, and in December of that same year, the Twins released Ortiz, and this is what he had to say: "I'm a really happy guy by nature. It takes a lot to wipe the smile off my face, but I was absolutely devastated. It was like my world was ending. Spring training was coming up, and it looked like I was done." However, he wasn't done quite yet. Just a few weeks after being released, Ortiz came across a longtime friend and pitcher for the Red Sox, Pedro Martinez, who, after hearing the news, immediately called the Red Sox front office to say this: "Listen, I'm in the Dominican and I ran into David Ortiz. He just got released by Minnesota. We need to sign him. This guy is going to be special." And sure enough, the Red Sox took a chance, signing him to a contract worth $1.25 million. This was a life-changing amount of money, especially during a time when the average MLB ticket was just $18.31. These days, that number has gone up all the way to $37, and that's one of the reasons why I use today's sponsor, SeatGeek. The baseball season is ramping up, and if you're like me, you try to go to as many games as possible. So to make that easier, you can use my code AVERAGEBASEBALL10 to get 10% off any tickets on SeatGeek, even if you bought tickets with them before. Now, I've personally used SeatGeek several times to see the Rangers, and despite the fact that they usually lose, it's definitely the easiest way to find good seats. They make it really simple to find great deals by rating all of their tickets from 1 to 10. Green means good and red means bad. Now, of course, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and you can even exchange your tickets before an event using a feature called swaps. And again, no matter how many times you've bought tickets with SeatGeek, you can still get 10% off with the code AVERAGEBASEBALL10. So next time you're buying tickets, make sure to use SeatGeek, because it really is the best way to find good seats. In a time of desperation, the Red Sox had given David a chance, and he wasted no time making a name for himself. Despite some initial frustration over limited playing time, he eventually became the primary designated hitter for Boston, and suddenly, he emerged as one of the best hitters in baseball, with 31 home runs and an OPS of 961. As a team, the Red Sox would end their season with 95 wins, securing a spot in the postseason for the first time in 4 years. However, after 7 back-and-forth games, the Red Sox would fall to the Yankees in the ALCS, a devastating loss that would weigh on their shoulders for years to come. Luckily for David Ortiz, he had already proven himself as an everyday player. So, with a renewed sense of confidence and the drive to overcome Boston's failure, Ortiz would put up incredible numbers in 2004. And for the first time in his career, he was named an All-Star. The Red Sox would finish second in the AL East behind none other than the Yankees. So as the wildcard team, their back was against the wall. But when it mattered most, Ortiz emerged more dominant than ever. Facing the Angels in the ALDS, the Red Sox were up 2-0 heading into Game 3, and with the game tied in the bottom of the 10th inning, Ortiz delivered a game-winning home run, sending Boston to the ALCS. So once again, they would face off against the Yankees, but at first, it seemed like any hope of getting revenge was lost. Boston would quickly fall behind in the series, losing the first 3 games without much competition. And keep in mind, no team in history had ever come back after being down 0-3. However, they wouldn't go down without a fight. And in Game 4, Ortiz delivered once again with another walk-off home run, giving the Red Sox the confidence they desperately needed. Game 5 would end in a similar fashion, with Ortiz hitting yet another walk-off in the bottom of the 14th. And after pushing the series all the way back to 7 games, the Red Sox had done the impossible. They had defeated the Yankees after being down 0-3, and were headed to the World Series for the first time since 1986. But the job wasn't finished quite yet.
You know, I always thought about going to the World Series and losing. I always dream about, I had a nightmare about. Because you go through the season beating the opposition, and then you get to the World Series, and then you have to pack to go home because you end up losing. I used to have nightmare about that.
Now, fortunately, these worries were quickly put to rest, as the Red Sox would dismantle the Cardinals in a 4-game sweep. So, after being at the lowest point of his life only 2 short years ago, David Ortiz was on top of the world. His 2004 postseason performance is still considered as one of the best of all time, and with more confidence than ever, he was ready for 2005. He would somehow manage to improve on his previous season, picking up his 2nd All-Star selection and narrowly missing out on an MVP. But even more notably, he continued to outperform anyone in baseball when it came to clutch situations. Throughout that season, Ortiz hit 3 walk-offs and was named the greatest clutch hitter in the history of the Boston Red Sox. So it came to no one's surprise when his contract was extended another 4 years. However, despite putting up historic seasons in both 2005 and 2006, Boston would fail to make anything happen in the postseason. That is, until 2007. By this point, Ortiz was already 31 years old, but he showed no signs of slowing down. In fact, 2007 is still his best season ever in terms of batting average, on-base percentage, OPS, and total hits. As for the Red Sox, the team was suddenly back in the hunt for a championship after winning 96 games. This meant that they would be facing off against the Angels in the first round, but this matchup resulted in an easy sweep for Boston. In fact, during that series, Ortiz hit for an insane average of .714. So now, the only team in their way of another World Series appearance was Cleveland. And after only 4 games, the Red Sox were just 1 game away from being eliminated. However, Boston was not shaken, as they had been in this situation before. And similar to their comeback in 2004, they managed to win in 7 games, and were headed to the World Series in a matchup against the Colorado Rockies. But this series was pretty much over before it even started. The Red Sox would easily sweep the Rockies, and just like that, Ortiz was a world champion for the second time in 4 years. But things would go downhill just as quickly, as in the years following this achievement, Ortiz would face massive controversy in the midst of declining performance. In 2008, he suffered the 3rd wrist injury of his career, resulting in his worst season in over 6 years. In 2009, his batting average would fall to the lowest point in his career at just .238. In fact, it was so bad that he even said, "I was about to start hitting right-handed, just to see if things changed." But just when things couldn't get any worse, a report came out in July of 2009, revealing that Ortiz had tested positive for steroids back in 2003, which also happened to be the year in which he suddenly became one of the best hitters in baseball. So, as you can imagine, fans were extremely upset, and Ortiz immediately denied the allegations.
I use a lot of supplements and vitamins, and even I have companies sending me supplements and things back in then, but I never use or buy any steroids.
Now, this was basically the end of the story until 2016, when MLB's commissioner released the following statement. There were at least 10 names on the list whose inclusion could be doubted for legitimate scientific reasons. Even if you were on that list, it was entirely possible that you were not a positive. So, despite continued speculation among fans, this would pretty much mark the end of any controversy. After all, the evidence was now destroyed, making it impossible to know if he really cheated. He would spend the next 2 years getting back to his previous level of performance. But after suffering several injuries and missing the postseason for 3 straight years, he started to wonder how much time he really had left. 2013 got off to a troubling start for the city of Boston, as on April 15th, the Boston Marathon bombing claimed the lives of several people and injured hundreds. So during a time of chaos and mourning, Ortiz stood in front of 35,000 fans, delivering a short but iconic speech.
This is our city, and nobody gonna dictate our freedom. Stay strong. Thank you.
Throughout that season, Ortiz would have an incredible year, leading the Red Sox to a first-place finish in the AL East. This would earn them a first-round matchup against the Tampa Bay Rays, and with the help of 2 home runs by David Ortiz, Boston would take care of the Rays in 4 games. However, next up was the Tigers, who, after winning Game 1, took an early 5-1 lead in Game 2. But in the bottom of the 8th inning, the Red Sox finally had a chance. After 2 hits and a walk, Ortiz came to the plate with the bases loaded. And on the very first pitch he saw, he hit a grand slam in one of the most memorable moments in postseason history. This would give them the confidence to win the series 4-2, and for the 3rd time in his career, Boston had earned a trip to the World Series. They were set to face the St. Louis Cardinals, and at 37 years old, Ortiz would have the best series of his entire life. He would hit for an unbelievable average of .688 in what is arguably the greatest World Series performance of all time. And after 6 games, Boston had won yet another World Series. Now, over the next few years, the Red Sox would unfortunately fall back into mediocrity, and on November 18th of 2015, Ortiz announced that he would be retiring from baseball following the 2016 season. But even at 40 years old, as one of the most unathletic players in the game, he continued to dominate. His 38 home runs in 2016 were the most ever by a player in his final year, and his insane performance would lead the Red Sox all the way to the postseason. Unfortunately, after only 3 games, Boston's season was over, and just like that, the story of David Ortiz had come to an emotional end, or at least that's what everyone thought.
Red Sox legend David Ortiz is being flown to Boston right now for emergency medical treatment after being shot in the Dominican Republic.
Ortiz rushed to the hospital for surgery, reportedly telling doctors, "Don't let me die, I'm a good man."
I don't have enough words to describe how, who David is, what David means to baseball. But I'm so disappointed to know that someone like David, who saved so many lives, can have someone after his life.
Thankfully, he would make a full recovery over the next few weeks, displaying the same resilience that he had shown his entire career. As you know, David Ortiz was never your typical athlete. He was one of the worst base runners of all time, with only 17 stolen bases in 20 years. Not to mention, he almost never picked up a glove. Yet, in 2022, he became the first career designated hitter to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So, despite his weaknesses, Big Papi always rose to the occasion, and is one of the best designated hitters of all time.